Hello, everyone. Welcome to Miami Beach Urban Studios Live Art Talk. I'm Colette Mello, and I'm here today with artist Adler Guerrier. These art talks are made possible through the generous support of the City of Miami Beach, Department of Tourism, and Office of Cultural Affairs. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Professor Tom Cicluna for organizing this art talk. Adler Guerrier is a multimedia artist whose work encompasses collage, print, photography, sculpture, and video. His poetic works reference a sense of place and history that is observed by the urban landscape flaneur. Adler has been exhibited widely throughout the United States and been part of the exhibitions such as the Defining Freestyle exhibition at the Studio Museum, curated by Thelma Golden in 2001, the prestigious Whitney Biennial in 2008, and in 2018 at the California African American Museum. Adler has also been exhibited in Miami venues, including Vizcaya Museum and Gardens, the Perez Art Museum Miami, and North Miami's MoCA, and many other venues. Adler's work has also been written about in the New York Times, Art in America, Art Forum, and other publications. He is represented by the David Castillo Gallery. Adler earned his BFA from the New World of Arts in Miami, and he was born in Haiti and has lived in Miami since 1986. If you have any questions or comments, please place them in the chat, and then we will pose them to Adler after his presentation. Adler, thank you so much for joining us today. I have been really looking forward to your presentation. I'm going to hand it off to you now.
Okay, hello everyone. Let's begin. Okay. All right. This talk is titled "Some Recent Works or Thought, Sunshine, and Flowers." It is the title comes from very recent reading, actually. It's in Rebecca Solzhenitsyn's newest book called Orwell's Roses. It's a book in which she visits George Orwell's cabin, and I believe a place called Waddington. I don't totally remember the place, in which is a place where one, I guess, appeared a time where he planted 7 rose bushes and a bunch of fruit trees. And then it was also at the same place that he wrote several of his books and notable essays. But at one point in this book, Solnit is remarking not just on Orwell's relationship to plants, as also as an adjacency to his relationship via essays that are against totalitarianism or for socialism, or I guess social works as well. And so the language of plants and the sort of the language of the agrarian, the pastoral, comes again and again in the essays, as Rebecca Solnit proposes. That is an indelible part in George Orwell's writing, or at least a formative part of his writing. So the quote that is on the screen: "Thought, sunshine, flowers. They wanted intangible as well as tangible goods, pleasures as well as necessities, and the time to pursue them, the time to have an inner life and freedom to roam in the outer world." This is in reference to how in the 1910s, during the period of women's suffrage and other pro-labor movement period, one of the many complaints of workers was that there wasn't enough time for them to think. There's not enough time for them to enjoy the sun, because labor practices pretty much kept people from from seeing the sun from 6 or 7 days a week. And there's clearly weren't enough time for them to enjoy or smell flowers. So this particular this particular wish for time to think and time to enjoy the sun and time to smell flowers goes hand in hand with that of a critique of labor, a critique of capital, a critique of status quo that still is relevant today. And in my practice, it's something that is that I privilege. I privilege the time of thinking. I privilege that space where I attempt to make relations between plants and the spaces that they're in and the spaces that I hold to larger ideas of living and being. So the first work I'm showing is I don't know how to make this go away. Okay, good. It's a recent collage that I made using this printed matter, this insert that was recently featured in Art in America magazine. It's an insert of my own photographs, in which I've been using them to create this collage. The title of the work really is suggestive as to the strategy that I'm going for. I'm interested in the particular space where navigating around language and form, specifically forms that are connected to emancipatory language, forms that are grounded in a kind of a reality or a landscape that is known to me. In this case, it's Florida. And how a geographic and physical wandering that occurs on landscape itself is connected to a kind of intellectual and poetic wandering. That is where the work aims to go. And the gestures of collage, of cutting into the photographs to allow one to see through, is also connected to kind of a wandering and discovery through making, a wandering and discovery that doesn't presupposes the ends, but where is through making and layering and some planning, of course, that the work is made. The original image, oh, I'm sorry. The original image is titled Wonder and Errancy, Memories Within, Citrus in St. Augustine. This is a work from last year, in which the original photograph is from 2020, when I was in St. Augustine for a residency at Flagler College. And part of the residency ended up being an exhibition, which I will talk about later. But this particular image was very intriguing to me because of the way the oranges lend themselves to being both symbolic of Florida and symbolic of a part of the landscape and symbolic as a marker in relationship to other places. St. Augustine has the privilege of being one of the first European settlement in North Americas, at least in what is now the United States anyway. That's consistently inhabited, and In its early days, it was a city founded at a time where colonial infighting was sort of, was occurring in the New World. At first, it was between the French and the Spanish, and later between the Spanish and the British. But as far as this image is concerned, we're concerned at the moment when the Spanish kingdom, I guess, allowed they promise freedom to Blacks who were enslaved in the British colonies, providing they make themselves part of the city, and they serve and they become Catholic. But that promise of freedom was enough that many ran away from plantations in South Carolina, the Carolinas, I should say, and made their way south to Florida in search of such freedom. And for me, what I was really interested in is thinking about that geographical space. How does one navigate that geographical space? How does one move south toward greater freedom while not having maps, road signs, and other indicators that would point to said path? There's a kind of wandering that necessarily had to occur with some known positions. And one of these positions for me had to do with the sort of agricultural difference between Florida and North Carolinas that is more emblematic of citrus plants. How citrus plants, they don't really grow in the cold, and so Florida seems to be in the subtropics. It's their hard limit. And so someone who were to be running away south, citrus plants would have been a marker for the potentiality of where they are, or an indicator to the narrative or to their journey south toward greater freedom. In the 17th century, I don't think there were citrus groves for any runaway to actually use as a marker. Florida actually became a citrus state much later, but the presence of citrus in Florida becomes, as it is the state plant, becomes that symbol that sort of that also becomes a line in the sand, a line where once you passed it, you were closer to a notion of freedom that could not be enjoyed in near geographies. In this case, it is the other 13 colonies. I mean, the southern colonies. This idea for me is very interesting in relationship to even the title, the way thoughts, sunshine, and flowers enter play within not just desire that we need to find in our way of being, but it is also a desire to encounter such notions within the landscape that we inhabit. It's not for everyone this sort of a relation between a notion of liberty, that of citrus, that of Florida, that sort of a triangulation will be made. But for many who did not enjoy a type of freedom, or for many who live in other places where they enjoyed less freedom, the signs and markers that they're looking for are not always as symbolic as the American flag or that of the dollar bill. Those things speaks of a different notion of freedom that is broad and that speaks of the sort of strength of American economy and American position. But there are other tangible things that signal to some intangibles that we were after. And for me, this photograph of a citrus plant at night with its haze and its soft focus speak to how the framing of something that is quite common and everyday in our landscape can serve as an indicator for something much larger, or can serve as an object that renews something that we are constantly after. There is another work that is with a similar title, which is Wonder and Errancy, Memories Within Zora in Florida. This work is also photographing, is also of a photograph shot in St. Augustine, Florida. It is in this municipal park that the city of St. Augustine has named after Zora Neale Hurston. Zora Neale Hurston being a novelist and anthropologist whose work was dedicated to collecting stories, both oral and written, of Black people, both in Florida and the Caribbean. And she traveled many places to collect stories and to retell those stories. There is something quite honorable about her work, but there's something also invigorating being in a place that is dedicated to her honor. And so it was in essence, one of my favorite places in St. Augustine. It's just a little park named after Zora Neale Hurston. I'm not sure if a crepe myrtle can be as symbolic as a citrus plant within the narrative of wonder and errancy and liberty. But as it is the dominant plant in this particular park, and this park is connected both to Zora Neale Hurston and in Florida, I think this is one of the, this is an aspect where the crepe myrtle may have gained more in this association. And for me, that's where the image is made. I was, as part of a product of the residency that I did in St. Augustine, ended up being this exhibition at the Adler Art Museum in Tiger College. And this was the invitation. So let's go through some installation shot and I'll speak more about some of the works in exhibition. Actually, I can speak more about this image before I continue. This is an image minus my name and the title of the show that hovers in the frame. This is an image of the Matanzas River, which runs east of St. Augustine. I guess it empties out into the Intracoastal relatively to St. Augustine and the Berry Islands. Matanzas River for me is very interesting because it would have been how one navigate most easily up and down Florida in the 16th and 17th centuries. And I mean, I think actually even down to the 19th centuries, people navigated very easily by boat. I think the trains appearing in Florida came relatively late, and clearly the highway system is a 1950s thing. So I like the river. I like the water. I like its approach, its relationship to the city. Not only it is where the Spanish mission who came to Florida landed, but it's also where within their rivalry with the French colony at Fort Caroline, and through a battle and encounter and what turns out to be a matanzas on the river. Matanzas is Spanish for slaughter, where eventually, for some reason, I should say, the Spanish named the river after a slaughter, versus what we assume the Timucuas would not have called the river that. So there's an interesting sort of dark, bloody, colonial, and heavy imposition on the river in relationship to the city, in relationship to the newness of the new world. All that is captured in that footprint on the edge of this river that flows. There's something about new enterprise, as it was phrased in colonialism, that in essence would conflate opportunity, openness, even the sense of calm, with a kind of strong urge for claiming and possession, and it is often connected to a kind of violence. And even the name of the river for me is kind of an indicator of that particular relationship. There's nothing necessarily violent about the river, but there is a kind of violence connected to the founding of St. Augustine and how it came to be and establish in relationship to Florida, the New World, and colonial rivalries. This is one installation shot of one of the two galleries in the exhibition. My practice, I do a lot of work on paper, a lot of photography, drawings and collage, and some sculptural work as well. And in this exhibition, that features a wall painting that is, you can see on the right. The wall painting is of a kind of a stylized design that is an ode to Fort Mossy, which is a fort that is about 2 miles north of St. Augustine. It was set up as a village and a first line of defense for St. Augustine. It was populated by mostly Blacks who were run away from the Carolinas, and mostly, I should say. I'm sure there are other population in there too. And it was a simple wooden picket fence cordon of a fort. I think it had a burn and then a picket fence. And so while eventually St. Augustine had a walled, it was a walled city, at least from the water side to protect it from cannon. Fort Mossy was just made out of wood. And so eventually it was destroyed at least twice. This is another view of the installation. This is a close-up of one of the corners where we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and technically 6 works in view. Most prominently in the center is a stylized protest sign, which is a series that I've been making since since 2007, I guess. But this one dates from 2017. It says, "Black longevity has its place, be free." And to the left of it is a small image that is partly appropriated from Life magazine. I'm going to talk about that later. And on the right, on the top, is a night scene, some night photograph looking through hibiscus leaves at night. And the bottom is also a night shot of the Matanzas River. And on the right is another photograph of the San Sebastian River, which is another river that is near St. Augustine. And what is barely legible there are some text on the wall, which is itself another work. As a close-up, I hope this is quite legible for y'all. You can see on the right side part of the protest sign where it says free still. And in the bottom where this is the text I refer to, where it says we want to live. And the small photograph, which I title how it is referred to in Life magazine. It said, "A Negro girl stands alone in St. Augustine." It was photographed by Lynn Pelham, I should say, from Ralpho Guillumet, which I believe is a photographic agency. So it was Life magazine, the issue of June 26, 1964. It was page 38. This is a source of it. In 1964, or I should say throughout the 1960s, especially the early 60s, the civil rights movement was very active in Northern Florida, as it was in the American South. And St. Augustine found itself to be quite front and center for a lot of protests. Some of them were in the city side, some of them, and they had to do with quite the development of the civil rights movement, the end of segregation, and for asking of more rights for Black Americans. And so, and of course, the protesters were met with some of the historical resistance that we've seen many times. I'm interested in this particular image, mostly because it is quite singular. It is of a moment where I can put a figure connected to a larger movement that is asking for more rights, right? This is also a kind of wandering through the American landscape, moving where figures, bodies, activists, students, preachers, pastors, and even elected officials, we're all moving to trying to get greater and greater rights for citizens of this country, which is quite different than the offering of the Spanish king to the formerly enslaved. But in the 60s, we weren't talking about, in essence, a rivalry between other colonies. We were talking about citizens of this country who was asking for more rights. And their trajectories took them both through Florida and through the city of St. Augustine. So for me, St. Augustine hold a larger history, a history that is not just written in the stone that made the city walls, not just a history that that has shaped the naming of its river, not just a history that is maybe held within the canopy of the vegetation within the city, but it is also in the printed media and the language and the culture and the politics that is connected to the city. And my wandering to the city as part of the residency, and for that matter, as an offering within the exhibition, is to make all these things make manifest somehow or another through works. And not just through works, but through many works in conversation to each other. So a moment like this for me is a moment where I can speak of many aspects of the city's history, but not just of the city's history, but it's also that lends itself to being Floridian history. And for that matter, it lends itself to be the story of the United States. And so there's a mode of working where, at least for me, producing images or even um, using fragmented language or using appropriated images from the source and the well of popular culture, are necessary in order to set up installations and dialogue and a sort of relationship between image and text and history and thoughts. And that's when I think my work tend to function in the most exciting way for me. And so that's why I aim to offer it to you. Some more images in the exhibition. These are, in the center is a photograph of blanket flowers that grows wild on the side of the road, and then two drawings that are layered and with images shot of St. Augustine using solvent transfers and collage techniques and drawing techniques to obliterate, to render, again, abstract what is already abstract in the landscape. The title of the two drawings on the left and right are Here in a Place Where Time Has Crossed and Left a Breathy Stain, J.W. There's a poet named J. Wright who wrote, from whom I borrowed the phrase, in a place where time has crossed and left a breathy stain. I really like that phrase when I encountered it within this poem. It is, I believe, signal the sort of human impression on landscape, a sort of how our affect tend to stain and make great impression on objects and forms and place and even structures, and to be in those places where this sort of impression is left, no matter how tenuous, no matter how thin and barely perceptible, it is often there. It is also the language of that is also a language of abstraction, where a notion of presence is felt and can be even accounted for, but it may not be made manifest through kind of dominant language. The photograph in the center has the title, The Struggle to Survive Beautifully, Wild and Wayward, Expressed in the Practice of Everyday Life. For me, this offers something slightly different, in which where the notion of beauty, wildness, and waywardness is found to be expressions of everyday living, or is found to be modifiers to the struggles that we do every day, right? There are the ways in which we live. There are the reasons for which we live, and those the reasons and the way we live are sometimes either very targeted and goal-oriented, but the mannerisms also matter. This particular title owes a lot to Saidiya Hartman in her book, Wayward Lives, in which the path of young girls and ladies moving from the American South to Philadelphia and Harlem from the 1890s to 1910s. These are girls who are leaving former plantations and agricultural labor in order to try and define other type of work in the city, but not just other type of work, it's other type of situation in which they could live. And some of these girls ended up living in tenement housing. Some of them were dancers, some of them were living in situations that were equally complex, but there was a trajectory of living one mode of living and labor that was overly shadowed by the legacy of slavery. That was the plantation lands and the American South. And by moving north, they hoped to find new situation. But the northern cities, Philadelphia and New York and Harlem specifically, that her book is focused on, offered other realities and other form of legacy where slavery, less right, and less freedom was also expressed. And because of the type of waywardness that the characters in Hartman's book manifested, they also rebelled and reacted to the structure that they found in both in the cities as well. So there was something quite beautiful about the desire to live well. It's also something we've done it the way I'm saying it, but that particular, it is not a given. I think for me, as an artist, I've always gravitated toward other artists or other humans who've managed to show me how to take beautiful leaps and bounds over obstacle, and other to land somewhere better, somewhere greater. And those leaps have to be not just practical, but they have to be beautiful in themselves. So far, the language that have dominated this presentation is that of wonder, errancy, wild waywardness, everyday life. All these things for me are the sort of the conceptual concern of my practice. It is very important that I feel that I make work that contribute to an expression of how I live, or I make work that parallel my desire to live in a manner that not just survive, but aims to shape how my survival occurs. And that particular struggle itself mirrors the struggle of art making. It is a struggle of expression. It is a struggle of being. It is not a given. There's no easy way for it. What makes it easier is to be better at expressing, is to sharpen one's tools in order to be more, in order for us to leap better, in essence. There's a lot of metaphors here, but you'll get the point. This is a close-up of this work again, with the text on the wall. Also, an errant utterance is quite literally a kind of a kind of blurted out statement that may be unattributed. And I also borrowed that from Hartman's book. In Hartman's book, she used the language of a chorus that speak in a particular voice that is both connected to the girls moving forward, and that of Hartman herself, who is both historian and really poetic in the way she writes. It's this other voice. It is quite literally it is similarly to the chorus in a Greek play. What is uttered from the chorus is these accents that supports the play, supports the act, supports a a player on stage. And so far, that is the way I'm hoping 3 words next to a frame drawing, that relationship. It is an errant utterance, in essence, wants to support the drawing within an installation and in a manner that is different than just this scene where 3 photographs are together. So yeah. These are some other text that floats into the wall. Here we are. I'm always interested in a notion of presence, Hereness, especially in contrast to a sort of there that is far away from us, abstract, and can easily function either as that function relationally to the here that we are in, or to the here that we share. It is in an exhibition. It also puts great, it makes the gallery very important as to where this here occurs. So the here of the gallery and the here in the photographs are parallel. Clearly, we can have multiple here in language. It's just we have to be flexible enough to allow time and space to become flexible. Determined to live free is another one. Embo here toward greater liberties, which is a kind of language that I mentioned already that is connected to this wondering, and even the we want to live free, which happened on the wall close to the woman holding the sign. It is quite literally putting language in her mouth, though she may not have said it. This is the second gallery that was in the exhibition. This is a wall of photographs, works on paper, and some text on the wall. The text on the wall, well, this is the close-up, I guess. The close-up, determined to live free. And the photograph is titled Errant Path to Emulate. It's a photograph of a dragonfly on a bamboo. And it is focused on not just on human agency, but on a non-human, an animal, who in essence whose path is probably the most freeing that we probably know. We humans should be envious, or if not envious, we should flat out emulate how the sort of freedom and the sort of openness that many of our fellow non-human earthlings exhibit. The particular freedom of a dragonfly is fascinating to watch, and in essence, to poeticize that path, to poeticize their being, becomes yet another structure to how we can propose a way of being on the landscape that we know, on the landscape that we all share. And this is another image of that's also an exhibition of the same park that is dedicated to Zora Neale Hurston. This is, I guess, contemporary. Viewpoints is an exhibition currently at the Bake House. It's an exhibition curated by Adler Guerrier and Laura Novoa. And the 2 drawings in the center are my work. They are similar to works on paper that I do, where I'm using my own photograph that I've at one point collaged, and then would use a solvent and a press to do a solvent transfer, and on top of that there are graphite marks, ink, colored pencil, and gouache. This particular 2 sets of drawings with the title Form Rested into a Garden Syntax, Uncertain, Adulterated, Strange, and Unauthorized. It's made from just last in the last winter, and it is a work that really aims at focus on this metaphor that is referred to as the garden syntax, the language of the garden, the way the garden itself is not only the way gardens itself not only holds vegetables, flowers, other plants, animals, but it also holds the gardener's intention. That's a form that exists in the garden. It also holds a sitter who is not the gardener, who happens to sit in the garden, who happens to show appreciation for flowers. The space of the flower, the space of the garden is one that is constantly in the process of arrangement, constantly in this process of wresting form into being something greater. And I think this is why the adjective that follows, uncertain and adulterated, strange and authorized, becomes really interesting for me. This is also happens to be what happens when I make a drawing, or most people make a drawing. We make marks and we shape it, we edit, we cut, we layer, we try again in order to land at a place where we have a composition that holds many subjectivities and sometimes plans and discoveries within them. This is another one from the series, number 3, which I don't have much to say about this. This specific work, We Will Join Malcolm, number 4, was featured at the exhibition that Colette mentioned, that was in California, in the California African American Museum. This is this favorite work of mine, mostly because it has the sort of language and marks that is constantly producing more association and more, and lends itself to a kind of utopian projection that is useful on one end, for imagining what landscape could be, or imagining what tomorrow could be. It was actually not just landscape. The language says, we will join with anyone, don't care what you are, as long as you want to change miserable conditions that exist on this earth. This bit of text is slightly chopped up and in its form, but is attributed to Malcolm X. And so this is the Malcolm the title refers to. And in it, Malcolm points to that he will join with anyone to change a miserable condition on earth. And for me, that's already a grand plan and grand scheme. Not only that he points to, working backwards, that misery as we've encountered it on earth can be changed, but he also points to, and it is not permanent, but he also points to the things that is required most for us to change it is for us to join together to do that. It's as simple as that. And then the work also layers such a text on images of flowers and plants, in essence, making a reference to a garden as the site within which we can change misery, or as a site, the sort of operative change for misery can begin, or a proper footprint for the change of misery. It's a text once I first encountered that has been very inspiring for me, and one that I've visited again and again. And so the next few images are new photographs, in essence, that's continuing this statement by Malcolm X. Thinking about what is the role of the garden? What is the site where we can join? How do we erase misery? How does beauty and notion of wildness, even errancy, plays within this? Not only within the structure or which is a kind of a politics to change misery, but also the aesthetic and poetic that is offered as that's offered along toward that project to change misery. So this is one of the photographs. Is in essence, it's a still life of flowers and plants. This is another. And the slides image mirrors I guess the second slide, where I showed you this collage before, and two other works that are sort of connected to it, in which, I don't know, actually, what I wanted to say with this slide, other than the fact that this is where I might think my work works best, not as singular images, but usually within sequence of images that are in dialogue with each other. I make works where I'm thinking of forms, either quite formally as geometric forms that appears in the work, but forms as in collage, drawings, photography are forms, but also gestures are forms, structures are forms, democracy is a form, misery eradication would be a form. Those are the kind of forms that the practice trying to think about, and I tend to want to layer them within the landscape, one that is not just a landscape that is accessible by me alone, but they tend to be in spaces whose accessibility is shared by other people that I don't know, so that the impression made on these forms, the sort of value that can be drawn from these forms, holds the subjectivities of many actors in the present, actors in the past, and actors in the future. And that tends to be one of the ways, one of the dominant ways that I work. It allows for discovery, even in a moment like this in the studio, where I happen to put 3 things on the wall that were made at different moment in time and made for different purposes, but sometimes they come together to add to something greater than the individual works. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Wonderful presentation. So I'd like to open it up to any questions or comments that anyone has. Please put it in the comment section. But I have a couple comments and a couple questions. I saw your work in, is it Art in America, the one work you showed with the oranges?
It was, yes.
Yep, I saw that work and I loved it. And I read about it. And then when you were just showing it today, it came to me, I was thinking of, you were talking about slavery and it being a marker to freedom. But I was also thinking of, it's definitely Florida. And then I was thinking of Anita Bryant, who I think she was an orange juice representative who used to support the juice company, but she was also an anti-gay rights person. And then it also made me think about what's going on in Tallahassee with Don't Say Gay. So that was something that came to mind today when I was just looking at that. And then I wanted you to speak about, you were in two really pivotal exhibitions early in your career, at the Studio Museum with freestyle, and then at the Whitney Museum for the biennial. And I would like, if you don't mind, just speaking how those exhibitions unfolded, and if you could talk a little bit about the artworks that were exhibited in those two exhibitions.
Sure, but the first thing I like to say about Aliza Orange is that, at least in Florida, oranges became pretty much huge in Florida with World War II, when, in essence, as an effort to feed soldiers in a war, Florida became sort of agriculturally strong, and because also we're in the East, etc. So the link between citrus to a kind of politic in America is kind of late, as far as I'm concerned. But if you come from other parts of the world, the citrus has already been sort of connected to things that are quite liberating. I mean, for me, there's nothing. The prize of a bright sunny afternoon is be able to sit under a tree and enjoy one's lemonade. This is a kind of freedom that is not informed by necessarily stature, but necessarily connection, by necessarily the dominance of American capitalism, or even the politics of the moment. It is a freedom that is enjoyed wonderfully on the individual level. And for me, that when looking at images, it is especially images that are open, right? And the linking of this moment to Don't Say Gay Bill is fair game, because I think part of the narrative of Florida for a long time have been its openness. Quite literally, the geography is large. Most of it is palmetto brush and pine trees. There's always a desire. I mean, the Everglades being the big park in which it goes forever. The scale of it is flat. The sort of positioning oneself against where one is always positioning oneself against the horizon versus something that is contained. That led to Florida being early on a place where not only the runaways, formerly enslaved, would run away too, but in the Seminole Indian Wars, the Native Americans also took that strategy of moving out, because the openness of Florida gave them a strategic advantage in the battle. But it cuts the other way as well. It cuts the other way in that Florida hasn't retained a lot of its dominant narrative, to the point that a place like South Florida that we live in, a place where LGBT families have felt very, very free for decades on end, and I would have imagined that would have seeped into being the DNA of the state. But the betrayal of the state legislature is to go against what we already know is true. We know Florida is a place where one can speak freely of one's identity, but yet the state legislature as the government wants to go against that. So I think that openness is it's one that is not bound, and it goes toward good things as much as it can pivot and goes toward things that are not very good. The two exhibitions that you mentioned in freestyle I had two works, and one of them is there were two sets of photographs. One of them was a work called Untitled Airport, which was a triptych of a photograph, a three photograph triptych of shot in 2000 at Miami International Airport. It's really about the sort of trajectory and desire to connect to faraway places. Was a moment of great openness, a moment that is defined against September 11th, where airport signal a desire to go places, not one that is connected to tragedy, security, and the sort of anxiety. And the second work that I showed in freestyle was my flaneurie NYC MIA, which was a work in which, through my flaneurie series, I created a narrative through 12 photographs that were shot both in Miami and in New York, in which the body of the flaneurie is a consistency within the images, and the city infrastructure falls back and becomes unified against the body of the flaneurie. It was a work in which this sort of desire to privilege the body that wants to know, the body that wants to connect, and the body that is native within an urban scene was privileged above the particular landscape, the particular scene. It was one where, in essence, it became fluid to speak about a Black body that can go here and there. Again, this is a work that is made before September 11, when a kind of a politics of movement was kind of different, at least in America. So those are my early works. And at the Whitney Biennial, I made a work that is indebted to the flaneurie. It is a work where it was shot and staged in Miami, but thinking about that of a politic that is connected to the 1960s protest movements, youth culture, the desire to reshape the world toward a new paradigm, one where greater freedom and Blackness are, again, prioritized.
Wonderful, thank you. In your exhibition, you at the Perez Art Museum Miami, with, I think Diana Nowie was the curator, you had some sculptures that I believe, if I remember correctly, you constructed them out of signs. Would you speak about that?
Oh, yes. So I have this series that I refer to as nodal sculptures. They are nodes within a network, or nodes within a landscape, or within a field. There are smallest sculptures made out of coroplast. Coroplast is the plastic signs in which political campaigns tend to put the candidate's name and stick them on lawns and throw them on fences, and we see them everywhere. And in 2010, I had an exhibition. Oh, is that right? Yes. In 2010, I had an exhibition at Art and Culture Center in Hollywood. And as part of the exhibition and making work for the exhibition, I noticed long after an election that those signs were still on a particular fence. And so I went and grabbed them, and I started making these sculptures out of them. I was interested in the fact that these were material already written on, already connected to a kind of ambition. The ambition is an ambition connected to both the democratic process, one where a citizen who is willing to serve is asking fellow citizens for their vote. And they might even point to reason why they should gain such vote, or reason or what they will do once they're in office. Those little plastic signs, at least during the moment of a campaign, are very loaded with such ambition to make better, in essence. But it is one that is connected to service, that is connected to being in office. And without being, that asks of us to be more generous as to, in the consideration of a candidate's desire to serve. Post-election, when a candidate is in office, we tend to have a different metric to deal with a public servant. We remember all the promises that they make. We get back to them. We remind them that they should do this, that, or the other. But at the moment of a campaign, there's a particular production that is utopian, in essence, that is connected to the best that democracy hoped to offer. And so once I found this material, I started using them. And another aspect of them, they tend to be, these are signs that are localized. You know, someone running for District 2 is running for District 2. So therefore, those signs will only be seen around District 2. So the signs that you see in one neighborhood are not always the sign that you see on a different neighborhood. And it's just for offices like senator, clearly. We have 2 senators in the state. The signs will be everywhere in the state. But so there's a localization to that language. So there's a localization to an ambition. There's a localization to desire that these signs hold. And the rest is, and then so making these sculptures with this material is a way to use a very true and localized human affect, and making it and trying to shape it into a different form in order to become a sculpture. And as a sculpture, I think they still animate these sort of, at least a notion of these ambition. They still reside in the material.
Thank you. I have a question from, I think it's Tom and his class. Great talk. Thank you. He's asking about politics of movement, of pandemic or post-pandemic. If you would talk about that.
Okay. I mean, we are still in the late stage of the pandemic. Well, the movement nowadays is very different with COVID-19, in that we became more conscious of not just of our own health, but the health of others, in a way that help, or that asks for us, in order to be a good citizen, for one thing, that we should be vaccinated, that we should wear masks, especially when we're in zones and areas with people that we don't know, even out of a courtesy, right? It's like, that is these things that are asked of us. But movement, at least for me, tend to be really tight. I am not, it's not that I have, my job requirement requires me to go places all the time. So I am only going a few places every once in a while. But movement is connected to a less just, it's connected to still to a desire to know, still a desire to do, but post-pandemic, there is more of a caveat that is connected to it. That is one of empathy, one of concern for a fellow human, one that was sort of different just a few years ago, because at least in the US, we didn't have a situation that forced all of us to consider both our health and all of us to consider our proximity to another human. These things, as we know, with the Trump administration, was politicized toward the wrong end, because many made a point to defend their right to be in whatever condition that they want to be in. But we still live on a planet with other people. And so there tend to be limits to ethics asks us, in essence, to consider the difference of another. And so it's often the consideration is not just to establish our form, our being, but it's really is to consider what is different between my form and my being with the person right is next to me. And what do they need of me in order for them to be who they need to be? That is and if it is for me to wear a mask, that's a simple ask. If it is for me to stand 6 feet back, that's also a simple ask. And so I think post-pandemic, some of these language, some of this concern about care, about being a citizen, about living together, have come to a fore. But also taking refuge in a space that fortifies also has become a dominant thing. Taking refuge in the space of the garden, taking refuge in the space that is natural, taking refuge in the space that fortifies one's health in order for us to be better. These have surfaced during the pandemic and will still be with us.
Thank you. Well, we are out of time, but I want to say thank you so much for your presentation. I was really looking forward to it, and I learned so much about your work. And I just wanted to end this with a quote from Lucy Lepar. She states that place-specific art should reveal new depths to make the space more meaningful to those that live there or spend time there, which I believe your artwork does. So again, I'm going to say thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us, and be well. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Adler. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Yes, it was great. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay.